For U.S. investors searching for diversification in their own portfolio, it might be a good time to look at the emerging market space. The ever-changing and often growing landscape may offer investors a pretty timely opportunity. We're going to talk all about that right now on UBS Trending. Hi, everybody, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. Thank you very much for joining us for today's show. My guest today in the studio is Kishore Rao, Principal and Lead Portfolio Manager from our partners at SGA. Kishore, nice to have you here in the studio. Good to see you.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for your time today.
I feel like we could go into a million different directions with EM because it's such a broad asset class, obviously, and there's a lot of opportunity there. But if we kind of just take a look at it from a top-down view, and we're talking to investors and viewers alike, what's the state of the emerging market landscape today? What's going on that we should know about?
Yeah, emerging markets are fascinating. They're exciting because there's so much incredible growth opportunities, but it does have some particular challenges as well. What's really fascinating to us is the rise and the emergence of the middle class throughout the world, and especially emerging markets, and particularly Asian middle class economies. The data is very clear. The spending by those populations is going from 30 trillion in 2015 to over 60 trillion by 2030. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities.
That 60 trillion number is just, it's hard to even imagine that number, especially doubling within just a few years from what it is today. Where do you attribute that to?
Well, I think you've seen the adoption of a lot more market-friendly economies and approaches in countries like India, Brazil, Mexico, and so Indonesia would be another interesting place. And so I think that opening of markets is really a key catalyst.
Yeah, we were just talking about India right before we started, and I know here at our Chief Investment Office, Alejo Charwanko and his team expect GDP expansion in India this year. It's the world's 5th largest economy and growing, double-digit earnings. It's incredible to see some of the opportunities specifically with India compared to where it was even just a decade ago.
Absolutely. Some things we like about India also, and as I mentioned, Brazil, Mexico, you have these democratic governance structures, and that is important because all of those countries, those three in particular, have elections this year. And not only do we have elections here in the United States, of course, but also in these other economies. And that might serve as a catalyst once those election uncertainties are resolved for those countries for more capital to flow into those countries and more investments and more growth, hopefully.
Right. Clearly, I know the U.S. election gets a lot of attention globally, but 80 countries are having elections this year, and a lot of those in the emerging world as well. So thanks for reminding us of that. And then just kind of broadening it even more, like obviously we here in the U.S. and you are as well, we're all keeping an eye on the Fed. We've got all this economic data. The economy in the U.S. seems to be fairly robust and it's strong with no signs of weakness. So there's expectations that perhaps the Fed may not even cut as much as we thought earlier this year. How might some of that, or maybe how much of the impact of what the Fed does impacts the emerging markets world?
Yeah, historically there has been a correlation, if not causality, when the U.S. Fed is tightening and liquidity dries up in the United States. That liquidity tightening affects emerging markets in particular. And to the extent at least the Fed is on pause or may do some even modest rate cutting at the end of the year, that might serve as another catalyst for capital to flow back into emerging markets.
So we could see opportunities in some of the EM stocks that might be coming out of those countries and even the individual economies.
Correct. The combination of the election outcome certainty, whatever those might be, as well as Fed pausing and easing could both serve as catalysts.
Right. So many potential variables ahead of us with the Fed, what they may or may not do, especially given the route of economic data that we've seen and inflation ticking a little bit higher here and there, but lots to kind of keep our eyes on there. With respect to a U.S. investor, so our audience here, for the most part, we're talking to U.S. folks and obviously some global folks, but from a U.S. perspective, where do you see opportunity within emerging markets for people here in the U.S.?
Yeah. So I think the data is pretty clear. The U.S. markets have had a phenomenal 15 years, basically from the GFC. And stocks outside of the U.S. have not done as well. These things tend to go on in cycles. I would not be so bold as to call a mean reversion today or next month or next year. I don't know when that will happen, but historically, these things have mean reverted. And so, we're particularly interested and excited about the opportunities that exist outside the United States. There's phenomenal growth companies here in the U.S., obviously, but lots of interesting growth companies outside the U.S. And I've alluded to a couple countries that we're particularly excited about: India, Mexico, and Brazil.
Right. Kishore, something else that we talk about often with our clients and our viewers is selectivity. It's very important, especially within the EM space. Not every country is designed the same. Not every company in each of those countries also has the same opportunities and successes, et cetera. So in sense of looking at the numbers, you said over the last 20 years or so, there have been sort of negative returns for a lot of companies within EM. Do you expect that the tides might turn for that, given the landscape and where it is today?
Yeah, I think the data is pretty clear. There's a lot of negative returns for a lot of companies around the world. And so it's really important to be really selective, but especially so in emerging markets, because there are greater opportunities, but there are greater risks. And so that's one of the reasons we're particularly enthusiastic about these consumer-oriented companies. I mentioned the data earlier about the significant rise of the middle classes in these countries. But the companies that serve the middle class in consumption tend to have lower variability in how they grow and more predictability. And that reduces a lot of risk for shareholders to be involved with these more predictable companies. If you also think about the tariff and trade wars and the tensions going on around the world between different governments, in our view, it's a higher value opportunity in companies that serve consumers, as opposed that are dependent on exports.
Right, especially as you mentioned, back to that $60 trillion number by 2030, as some experts and you have also surmised. It's an incredible opportunity, and that cyclicality that you talk about clearly could be a real winner for a lot of companies within the EM space. Thank you, Kishore. This is great. I mean, what I love about this conversation is it allows for thoughts of diversification within a portfolio. And we, of course, here at UBS think that a diversified portfolio is really key, especially in this environment. So having this conversation has been really helpful. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for your time
Great.
today.
Good to see you. Kishore Rao, again, from SGA. And if you'd like more information on anything we talked about today and the commentary coming from our own Chief Investment Office, visit our website at ubs.com/views. Plus, you can follow UBS on social media. We're on all the major channels, including LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and we're on Instagram at UBS Trending. Lots of studios content there for you to follow. And as we've said a bunch of times in this episode, make sure you're speaking with your financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great day, everybody, and remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. We'll see you soon.